Good morning. Today we are going to talk about inheritance and how the characteristics pass on from generation to the next generation. So we said before that we have two types of reproduction, which are sexual and asexual reproduction. So living organisms can pass on their characteristics to the next generation in these two ways, sexual and asexual reproduction. So let's revise sexual reproduction. You know that in sexual reproduction we need two organisms of the same species, one male and the second one is female. Each individual produces sex cells, which are sperms and ovum. And also sexual reproduction always involves fertilization process, which means the fusion of the gametes. So again, we need two organisms, of the same species, sure. One male from the testis and the second one female from the ovary. So during meiosis, they will divide into two haploid gametes, N. And during fertilization process, which is the fusion of the gametes, we will produce the offspring. So offspring receives some genes from each parent. So shows a mixture of parental characteristics. So here you have to know that offspring is diploid. Gametes are haploid, but the offspring, like the parents, is diploid. So here, as you know, that has received, so the offspring has received one set of genes from the father and the second one from the mother. So in sexual reproduction, a mixture of genes is passed from parents to offspring. You have to know that this process is not random. Actually, there are certain rules that govern how genes will pass on. Now let's understand these rules. We have to know some specific concepts before understanding it. The first concept, we explained it before, which is the chromosome. You know that chromosomes in general carry genetic information as a series of genes. So here we have a chromosome, and this chromosome carries genetic information as a series of genes. Each gene has its own position. For example, eye color, this is the position of eye color. Hair texture gene, here is the position of hair texture, and also the position of ear shape is here. So you will not find the gene of ear shape here. You will not find it here. It has its own position, so it has a fixed position. Also for hair texture, eye color, and other characteristics in our bodies. So if you focus here, you will find that we are talking about the three different genes, which are eye color, hair texture, and ear shape. And this is the position of eye color, this is the position of hair texture, and here we have the position of ear shape. Now, the second thing, you have to know that each chromosome in the nucleus of a diploid organism has a partner. So each chromosome has a partner that carries the same genes. So the partner of the chromosome carries the same genes in the chromosome. So here we have two chromosomes, both carry the same series of genes in the same positions. So eye color gene is here, also in the partner, the eye color gene here. In hair texture gene, also here, the position of hair texture gene. And you know that a pair of chromosomes is called an homologous pair. So here we have one homologous pair this homologous pair has a pair of chromosomes. And now the third concept is allele. If you focus here on those two chromosomes, you will find that each chromosome may carry alternative forms of the same gene. So if you remember, we said here we have eye color. Here we have a blue eye color, and here we have a brown eye color. So we have alternative forms of the same gene. So here in the first chromosome, the eye color gene is blue. And in the second chromosome, the eye color is brown. So these alternative forms of the same gene are called alleles. For example, the gene for ear shape, okay, has alleles that code for looped or no loop. Like eye color, blue and brown, here we have ear shape, looped or no loop. And the last two concepts are heterozygous and homozygous. Now focus on those two concepts. Now if both alternative alleles are present in a particular cell nucleus, then the cell is heterozygous, just for that characteristic. For example, here, the characteristic of eye color is in the first chromosome is blue, and in the second chromosome is brown. So both alternative alleles, which are blue and brown, are present. So this cell is heterozygous for this characteristic, which is eye color here. Okay? And also the same for ear shape. So the characteristic of ear shape in the first chromosome is looped, and in the second chromosome is no loop. So both alternative alleles, which are looped and no loop, are present in the two chromosomes. So this cell also is heterozygous for this characteristic here is the ear shape. So heterozygous, presence of the two alleles, okay, two alternative forms. Okay, now homozygous, if the nucleus carries the same allele on both members of the homologous pair or in the two chromosomes. For example, here we have hair structure characteristic. So in the first chromosome, straight hair texture, and in the second chromosome also straight hair texture. So both members of the homologous pair is the same. So this cell is homozygous for this characteristic, which is hair texture. Okay, so if we have both alternative forms, we called it heterozygous. But if we have the same form, like straight in the first chromosome and straight in the second chromosome, we called it homozygous. Okay, so chromosome carry genetic information as a series of genes. Each chromosome in the nucleus of a diploid organism has a partner that carries the same genes, and here the pair of chromosomes is called homologous pair. Okay. Now, if you remember in the previous lesson, in meiosis process, in the second step, in homologous pairs of chromosome line up. Here in this step, we say that the homologous pair line up to offer the chance of variation. Okay, so they lined up just to offer the chance of variation. So here in your book, we have a homologous pair. So we have 2 chromosomes in a homologous pair. They line up here. So as we said, we have 1 chromosome and each chromosome has a partner in the nucleus. Okay? And they lined up to offer chance for variation. Okay. Also, as we say that we have heterozygous and homozygous. Heterozygous for eye color and ear shape. That means both alternative alleles are present. But in homozygous, for hair texture, both chromosomes have the same forms of gene. And as we said also here, genes code for characteristics such as having color in the eye, and alleles are different from the gene that code for alternatives of the same characteristics such as blue or brown. So when they have blue and brown in both chromosomes, so we call it heterozygous because it has alternative alleles. This homologous pair has alternative alleles. Okay. Now in heterozygous cell, when the members of the homologous pair separated during meiosis, the gametes will contain different alleles. This means that when gametes fuse in fertilization, the resulting zygote may have a number of different possible allele combinations. Now, let's see how we make this combination and how fertilization process take place here. So, focus in this diagram. We have 2 diploid cells. The first diploid cell from the male and the second diploid cell from the female. And those 2 cells are heterozygous. That means they have different alleles or alternative forms of alleles. Here, loop in the first chromosome, one ear shape. Here, no loop gene in the second chromosome. This for male cell. In female cell also we have loop and no loop in 2 different chromosomes. And during meiosis, the gametes will contain different alleles. So meiosis divide the cell into 2 different cells. Each cell has a chromosome. The first chromosome has gene looped ear shape, and the second cell has no loop ear shape cell or chromosome. This for male. What about female? After meiosis, so meiosis produces haploid. Haploid means N. So gametes which carry only one of the chromosomes from each homologous pair. So also we have looped and the second cell no loop ear shape. So in fertilization process, the resulting zygote may have a number of different possible allele combinations. So fertilization is completely random. Either of the male gametes can fuse with either of the female gametes. So why fertilization is completely random? Because either of the male gametes can fuse with either of the female gametes. The easiest way to work out the possible combinations of gametes to form a zygote is to draw a square like this one. Okay, how we draw this square? Let's start with the first gamete. When the first gamete in male fuse with the first gamete in the female, they will produce this. So looped with looped. So this is the first square. Looped from the male and looped from female. So the ear shape of the offspring will be looped, because looped is the dominant allele here. Okay, what will happen when no loop gamete connect or fuse with loop gamete? They will produce no loop with looped. So here the dominant also allele is looped. So the ear shape of the offspring will be looped. Okay, what will happen when no loop gamete from the male fuse with loop gamete from female? So no loop with loop. Also that will produce heterozygous cell. So this cell is heterozygous because it has the alternative forms of alleles. Okay. And the last possible combination is when no loop ear shape connect with no loop ear shape from female. They will produce a homozygous cell because no loop with no loop. So here the ear shape of the offspring will be no loop. So here we have two. From the possible combinations, two heterozygous cells, this one and this one, two heterozygous cells, possibles those, and two homozygous cells, which are loop with loop and no loop with no loop. Okay, now here they wrote something. These offspring have the heterozygous combination of alleles for ear shape, which characteristic looped or no loop will show up. This depends which allele is dominant. As we say that if looped is dominant, so the ear shape of three offspring will be looped, and the last offspring, because there is no dominant, both are no loop, so the shape will be no loop. And which one is recessive? You have to know that the recessive is the characteristic which, if it appears in the cell, it will not give the shape for the organism. So here no loop is recessive, for example. So the shape of this cell will be looped. Why? Because looped is dominant allele. So the dominant allele is the one that shows up the phenotype of these cells. And the recessive allele is one that is hidden. So the recessive will be hidden in the phenotype of these cells. Okay, so here no loop and no loop, those two characteristics or two alleles will be hidden, but the dominant shows up the phenotype of these cells. So the phenotype of this cell is looped. The phenotype of this cell is looped if looped looped characteristic is dominant. So the dominant shows up the phenotype of these cells. Okay, now you have many concepts. Let's make a revision for those concepts. Homologous pair. As we say that homologous pair, chromosomes with the same genes in the same positions. One of the pair comes from the father and the second chromosome comes from the mother. So homologous pair, chromosomes with the same genes in the same positions. one of the pair comes from the father and one from the mother. This is the first concept, homologous pair. The second concept we have heterozygous, as we say that a nucleus carrying both alternative allele, alleles of a gene. So when a nucleus carrying both alternative alleles of a gene, this called heterozygous. So here in eye color we have a blue and a brown. So this gene and this cells in this gene is heterozygous because it carries both alternative alleles. Okay? What about homozygous? A nucleus carrying only one of the alternative alleles of a gene. So here in the hair texture, this nucleus carrying only one of the alternative alleles of a gene, which is a straight hair texture. And it does not have copies of that allele. Okay? We don't have copies. So, here, in this square, we have looped. So this one homozygous cell, and no loop with no loop, also homozygous cell. But also here we have looped with no loop and no loop with loop. Also we have two heterozygous cells. So two homozygous cells and two heterozygous cells. Okay, now what is the difference between gene and allele? You have to know that a gene is section of DNA. So gene, section of DNA. Here we have DNA, gene. Here we have another gene. So a gene is a section of DNA that controls the production of a particular protein. But an allele is an alternative form of a gene. So an allele is an alternative form of a gene. Okay. The last thing we want to understand, what do we mean by dominant allele? As we say that dominant alleles show their effect even if the individual only has one copy of the allele, also known as being heterozygous. For example, the allele for brown eyes is dominant. Therefore, you only need one copy of the brown eye allele to have a brown eyes. Although with two copies, you will still have a brown eyes. Understand that here, if we have the mother has a brown eyes and the father has a brown eyes. Here, the brown is dominant. B capital is dominant, which is a brown. Okay? But mother and father both have the recessive allele. Now, what will happen when this mother, or the gametes from the mother fuse with the gametes from the father? We have 4 possibles. Okay, the first one, if the dominant brown eye allele connect with the dominant or fuse with the dominant brown eye allele in the father, they will produce an offspring has B capital. So the offspring eye color is brown. Why? Because the dominant here is brown. But if the B small from the mother connect with B capital, B small for blue, which is recessive blue eye allele, connect or fuse with dominant brown eye allele from the father, also they will produce brown eye color, because B capital, B small brown with the blue, the color will be brown eyes because the dominant is brown. And also here the same, the mother B capital, the father B small, the possible combination will be B capital B small. Also it's a brown eye color or eyes color. But if recessive blue eye allele fused with recessive blue eye allele, here the only possible to get blue eye color. Okay, so B small with B small, that will produce blue eyes. Here we have another example. If the mother has blue eyes and the father, for example, brown eyes. Now blue means B small, B small. So blue only appear when we have two recessive blue eye allele. So B small, those are recessive blue eye allele. Okay, what about the father B capital B small? So his color, eye color is brown. Now when B small with B capital, that will produce B capital B small, and B capital B small is brown eyes. B small, it's recessive blue eye allele, so the color will be blue. B small, B capital, it will be brown because B capital is dominant brown eye allele, so the color here will which appear brown. B small with B small, that will produce blue eyes because B with B, they are both are recessive blue eye allele, so it's not dominant. By presence of the dominant, the color will appear as the dominant. So the dominant here is a brown. So if one, in any possible combination, if B capital appears, so the color will be brown. Okay? So that's the meaning of the dominant. Thank you for listening. Study this lesson well. Good luck.